Petersen previously served as communication director for former U.S. Senate nominee Admiral Mike Franken. Following his candidacy for the Iowa State Senate in 2020, CJ worked to build civic engagement among rural Iowans, including taking part in a rural queer working group to improve political engagement for queer people who live in rural spaces. He has worked in the legislature for Representative Sammy Sheets and continues to work as a public servant in the office of Iowa State Auditor. Born and raised in Southwest Iowa, CJ grew up using American Sign Language at home and is hard of hearing. Living at this intersection of the LGBTQ+ and disability communities, CJ strives for inclusion and acceptance for all who want to participate in the political process. A current student at the University of Iowa majoring in political science, CJ believes there's nothing wrong with constant growth in education. He and his husband live on a small farm in rural Ottoman County, home of Albert the Bull, where they are active in their community. And I don't know if I'm remembering this right. Is that Bull? Up there. Okay. I learned it a different way. Next. CJ believes the best way to achieve results when working with others is to remember that nobody's always right and that a broken clock is right twice a day. Please help me welcome CJ.
Good morning. Good morning. One of the things about being the shortest speaker on the dais is that you always have to move the microphone around a little bit. So, can everyone hear me okay back there? I honestly can't tell if my hearing is faced that way. So, good morning, everyone. My name is CJ Petersen. I am a Southwest Iowa native. I was just telling this gentleman up here at the table with me that moving from Carroll County back to Ottoman County was very nice because everyone spelled Petersen the correct way again, with the EM spelling rather than the ON. So today I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you all about, and I started to think about the first time I realized what politics really was about. And I flashed back to being about 10 years old, sitting in a dark, dingy basement room in a courthouse in Cass County, Iowa. And my single mother was applying for food assistance. And I remember just out of the blue, my mom started yelling and she said, $17, what the hell am I gonna do with $17? And the woman suggested that maybe she pick up some more hours at work, which, at $5.15 an hour was just not going to do much for our small family. So as we grew up, and continued through life, I started to realize that other people make decisions for us a lot of the time. And politics is about who gets to make those decisions. And sometimes people are involved in politics because it gives them a sense of power, it gives them a sense of control over things that the areas of our lives that we don't always think about. So it doesn't matter to a high-paid political consultant whether there's a single mother out there just kind of giving up on the process. And sometimes you begin to wonder if her giving up is actually the whole point of it, right? Maybe she'll just give up at some point. And then we get to say that we reduce the welfare rolls and less people are applying for assistance. That means that we succeeded. So, so, of course, I was interested in politics from a young age. Anybody in here working a dream job right now? Anybody have their dream job? And I know Mike has his dream job. So anyway, I'm one of those people. I very rarely meet people who have two things going for them. They're working their dream job and they remember exactly where they were when they realized what they wanted their dream job to be. And so for me, it was 2006. I was 16 years old. I turned on Fox News because that's what we watched at home. And I saw Dana Perino, the White House press secretary, just going at it with Helen Thomas. Some of you might remember Helen Thomas. And they were just going back and forth. And I was like, that woman is so sassy. I want to be a press secretary someday. And I had never really actually thought that this would happen to me, but here I am. I'm the press secretary for the one statewide official who was still a Democrat in Iowa, right? So Of course, deciding that I wanted to be involved in politics, and coming from rural Southwest Iowa and one of the 5 counties in Iowa that never voted for Franklin Roosevelt, I turned 17 and a half and promptly registered to vote as a Republican, and spent the next several years working on Republican campaigns, including the 2010 Republican coordinated campaign working to elect Branstad, Reynolds, and Chuck Grassley. So, of course, a little over a decade later, I ended up working and giving Mr. Grassley the toughest fight of his political career. So, life is interesting, life is weird, and it never usually ends up where you think it's going to go. So, I did not have in my storybook of my life struggling with alcoholism through most of my 20s. I did not have deciding to go back to college at 30 years old on my book, right? I was supposed to be done 10 years ago. And the thing that I just want to make clear today is that politics should be about how we can add value to the process for everyone, whether they're a single mother like my mom, or they're somebody in their, early 30s going back to school like me, or some of you who may be retired and haven't, decided to sit down and just take some time off yet, right? You're here at 7 o'clock on a Friday morning. So, I guess I don't have a ton to share with you about, my wisdom and political insights, because until Tuesday this last week, I never actually won an election before I should have. But one thing I do want to make clear is that one really interesting thing happened this week in Iowa politics, and that's that Warren County voters rejected an extremist Republican candidate who it really makes me feel good that people are still reading the news these days. I didn't have to say it, they all knew what I was talking about. So, I guess what I really want to make clear is that Warren County's results this week show, and anybody who's not familiar, there was an extremist election denier, conspiracy theorist who was appointed to county auditor. Somebody who doesn't believe in elections was supposed to be overseeing elections, and we were able to move the goalpost, or move the election results 59 points to the other side of 2022. So, and win that election going away. So I did that as a volunteer, not in my capacity as a press secretary for the state auditor, but I went and worked on that race, and then I'm really proud of the people of Warren County. So what that really shows me is that when people get together in Iowa and say, the Democratic Party is dead, this is a fascist state, it's all done, it's over, go home, that's just not true. All we have to do is work together. If the entire state of Iowa put in the same kind of organizing effort that we did in Warren County, we have 86 blue counties in the state. 86. It's possible. And I'm not trying to get too partisan here, but that's just kind of where we are. So with that, I think I've talked enough about myself. I guess I'm ready now to obfuscate and reject the premise of your questions.
Pick rural Iowa to teach, quite frankly, with the school voucher program, and we had all this money sitting in the bank that didn't spend it. Now they're building bridges and roads, taking credit for it. When's rural Iowa going to wake up? The pipeline, they're just standing by and letting these people, let the courts decide which they stack. They go through these people's land with these pipes. I don't know that rural Iowa is really seeing what's happening to them, especially the school voucher.
So here's the thing, there's an old phrase, what have you done for me lately? And I think we need to start really asking that question. And I've been working on this for quite some time with ruralorganizing.org, and they are an organization that's attempting to break through in rural Iowa, or rural America generally. And some of the work they've done, especially in Ohio in the last cycle, they put some money behind some funding. I think if you were going to take this paid media, there's a lot of people who think that paid media doesn't do anything anymore, but especially in the radio, we have to break through in rural spaces. If I had all the answers, I'd be working in DC right now. Right? So I'm not going to pretend that everything is, hunky-dory and perfect or easily solved. But One thing I can tell you is that Iowa has gone through this cyclical change about every 20 years for the last century. So ever since the mid-1960s, when it was Bill Hughes running for governor, the Democratic Party chair said that Iowa would go Democratic when Hell went Methodist, right? And lo and behold, Iowa went Democratic. So, and now Methodists are leaving the church. I don't know. It's a weird thing happening in this world right now. But what I would say is really this is cycle. So 20 years ago, Democrats had all of the statewide elected officials except for one. Anybody know which one that was? The auditor's office.
Oh, boy.
It flips. 2 decades makes a big difference. Some of us have more decades left than others, but I can just tell you that it will keep cycling. You know, this is just part of the ebb and flow. I mean, if I was, I can actually speak to this. I was a Republican when that was happening, and I felt like Iowa was a hopeless, lost place that was never coming back, right? And here, I just keep joining the team that loses all the time. So I don't know. So when I was a Republican, I felt like I was hopeless and lost. So I would just say, don't feel hopeless and don't stop talking to people. I mean, we talk to people all the time, and when you talk to voters and you talk to people who think differently than you now, they're going to remember you next time they hear something that confirms what you told them, especially if they trust you and they like you. So, any other questions? Yes.
How constrained is the auditor in his investigative efforts and fulfilling the duties of his office, given the legislation adopted by the?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that Governor Reynolds said that it did not target the auditors. You can just take her at her word, right? So the actual, the true answer is we don't know yet. And generally speaking, the auditor's office, the work of the auditor's office goes forward as it has. And it's very interesting because we won't know until we know, because they haven't used the law yet. They haven't used it to hide any information yet. The interesting thing about the law is that it only applies to state agencies. It doesn't apply to the city of Johnston, for example, or the city, Carroll County, or, the Audubon County Memorial Hospital, so, we may not see that for a while. Most are going to come in the form of, the state audits where we're reviewing, Medicaid or things like that. And then we're going to find that comes up. So, and then I don't want to speculate too much on that. So, yeah.
You help Rob with his Transparency Tuesdays, the little clips that he does on Facebook, or does he do a lot of that himself?
So Rob is
camera, right?
So Rob is an odd politician in that he is very much, and I don't know if it's just a product of him being a millennial, but like he's just very much, he does a lot of those things on his own, most of it on his own. So Transparency Tuesday, I'm sitting there watching to hear what he's going to say, just like you all are. So, and a little bit of a hurt, palpitation there. But no, he what you see is actually who he is, and too much to the disgruntlement of some Democrats and the excitement or disgruntlement of some Republicans. Just what you see is what you get, and I think that's something valuable in an elected official. Yeah.
So what's it like being a gay farm couple, a girl out of town?
Well, we don't have neighbors, which is the first step. Actually, we did not get along well with our previous neighbors and where we lived before, and so the way that our house sat in that house with the neighbor's yard kind of encircled our yard. And so he would always put up like a big Trump billboard, like right next to the property line. And so I would get texts from people saying, "Oh, you saw the light, you put up a Trump sign." And I think, and so we moved out to the acreage. It was funny because I said, hey, no neighbors, great. And now this morning I noticed that there's a two-story house going up right across the road. So we're going to have neighbors, and that's okay. But honestly, I find that most of the farmers in rural Ogden County are still Democrats, over Democrats, and it's interesting. I think that a lot of people understand more than we like to think how the trade, wars and the anti-China tariffs and things of the last presidential administration has hurt farmers in Iowa. I think they understand better than we think, and I like it out there. So. And you had a question there in the red shirt.
I think politics is a lot about money, and the auditor has to oversee where the money's going. So when the governor sends troops to the border, it seems like that's a misuse of money. But it also seems that the governor can control what the auditor can even look at. So how can the auditor ever undermine what the governor is even doing?
Well, I do want to make clear, so the politics is about money, so please donate to your favorite candidate of choice. The First Friday Breakfast Club is also about raising money for scholarships, so please contribute to the First Friday Breakfast Club. It's a 501c3, so your donations are tax deductible. And so the other thing, I would just kind of revert back to the former statement, we are reviewing, I'm not an auditor. In our office, we like to have a professional team of professional work. I am not reviewing personally the spending of the money to the southern border or sending the troops and the state troopers. What I can tell you is that the state troopers, the state patrol put out a report, I believe it was last year, that said that they were actually short-staffed and having trouble finding people to be on the road. So it's an open question whether or not we're sacrificing public safety for Iowans for a political spend. I don't know. And speaking for myself when I say that. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things that they're short-staffed is they've been understaffed by 100 troopers for the last 10 years. Yeah. Yeah, supposedly the Republican Party is the party of law and order.
It makes you wonder why they're defunding the police, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Just another comment. It is so great for those of us that have been around for a while, to start seeing young people that are involved in politics openly. I was a political science major in the late 60s and had the dream of being the youngest United States Senator of Vermont. Oh, back in that time, as soon as I realized I was gay, that possibility not even exists. I was still a psychiatric diagnosis. And to see young people today who are out. And thank you for your service.
Thank you. One thing I do want to touch on is even 15 years ago when I was just getting out of high school, it was so different then than it is now. I was at the election watch party the other night for the Warren County Auditor candidate, and there was there were these young people, and I swear all the young political staffers are queer now, like it's just a thing, and whether they're Republican or Democrat, and it's interesting. So just somebody they said something about, oh, you're so lucky you get to work in the political realm or what have you. I mean, we're so excited, blah blah blah. Older people like you, and so for you to call me young, actually, very nice. I appreciate that. I'm graying in all the right places at the wrong time. So anyway, yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the dynamic between Rob and Governor Reynolds? Is there, I suppose there's a little animosity. I can sense that, sometimes Rob's post might get under her skin, but I'm curious because Reynolds in this last year or so, she's starting to go after people, like even in her own party, she went after the people who didn't support her education thing. Is there a campaign underway to go after Rob from her part?
the Republican Governors Association has a tracker following Rob around to public town hall events, so I can't speak to what the governor wants to do about Rob. I can tell you that, yes, she signed a bill that's, purportedly limits his authority as state auditor, right? So as far as their personal relationship, they get along fine from what I can tell. I mean, they're not often in the same room. But I mean, she works just down the hall from us, so I mean, we can wave at them in their windows from our windows, so, I think that, the governor got them on this fine. And I don't know what her answer would be, but I assume it'd be the same. Yes, Adam.
I clearly know you. I'll throw you a softball. So you kind of glossed over this. What came first? The transformation of being a Republican to a Democrat, or coming out?
I said for many years that it was easier to be a gay man among my Republican friends than it was to be a Republican among my gay friends, right? Which understandably so, right? So I was working on the Romney 2012 campaign and also like going out to the gay bars every night here in Des Moines, right? Like, I mean, it was just like, but that's not entirely, it's less common than it was a decade ago, but 2015, 2016, that presidential cycle was really the end of the road for me. In 2012, I supported Mitt Romney because I was trying to like stave off what I saw coming, which was Bachman and Herman Cain and, that whole fiasco. So I would say that the transformation kind of happened over a couple of years. And then I found myself in a Bernie Sanders campaign office in 2015 in the fall, and they said, well, if you want to caucus for Bernie, you have to register as a Democrat. And I said, oh, okay, here we go, right? And so, interestingly enough, during that campaign, I got accused of being a Republican more than I ever have in my life. But yeah, so that was and I will say that, the transition has been interesting, but I also think that it's just a product of learning and growing and becoming more able to accept who I am as a person. So, and at the end of the day, what some of these folks won't understand and what nobody else will tell them is that they will always hate you, no matter what. And once I realized that, it was much easier to walk away. So, even if you're the good one at the time. So, yeah. Yes.
Your tagline about even a broken clock is right twice a day. It's a bit cynical, but it also speaks to, I think, finding common ground and civil. Can you speak to the origin of why you use that tag phrase?
So it's paraphrased from Bill Clinton's speech at the 2012 Democratic Convention, right? So I think that what I'm getting at there is that I don't think anybody has a monopoly, either side has a monopoly on good ideas. One party rule doesn't work anywhere it's tried, whether it's in, Iowa, it's not going to work here. And it does not work in, Illinois. And like what, 6 out of the last 7 Democratic governors are like in jail or something. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, the single party rule, I don't think works for everyone. What I'd like to see is to see some balance come back to state government. And, you see a great model for this, and it may get me in trouble for saying this, and this is just my opinion, but President Biden is doing a great job of working with Republicans, and I mean, he got Republicans to commit to leaving Social Security and Medicare alone, like on live TV. So, I mean, I think that when you acknowledge other people's strengths and then also recognize that sometimes your own strengths can be weaknesses, and just kind of being willing to come to the table and talk to people who disagree with you. One example of this, when that Senate File 478 was happening, anybody know who Representative Luana Stoltenberg is? I don't know. Luana Stoltenberg was at the January 6th. She wasn't at the insurrection, she was just outside. But she became famous on the 700 Club with Pat Robertson because she had 3 abortions and like regrets it. And now she's a right-wing activist turned Iowa State representative. So, she actually sponsored the bill to ban gay marriage in the legislature this last year. So the reason I bring her up is because she is actually like one of the few Republicans on that side of the aisle, one of the people on that side of the aisle when I worked in the legislature that I had a good rapport with. And knowing that she is actively working to destroy everything that my husband and I have built together, but also knowing that a broken clock is right twice a day, and she voted against the auditor bill because she thought there was a power grab from the governor. So like being able to have those relationships with people, even though I'm not being an apologist here, but I'm just saying, even though someone may disagree with you on 90% of the issues, like if someone's willing to come to the right side of the aisle or the right side of the issue when you meet them to, I think that's worth noting, and it's worth maintaining those relationships. Because here's the thing, I know you want me to wrap up here, but even if we get a Democratic governor 4 years from now, we're still going to probably have at least one chamber of the legislature that's Republican. You have to be willing to work with the other side.
That's fine. As a communications person, my perception of rural Iowa is that farmers, they're in their pickups, they're in their tractors. All that's on radio is right-wing stuff. So there's no alternative that they hear when they're out working. And then also the dirt of all the small local papers across the state closing. How much would you say that affects rural Iowa politics?
Well, first of all, I'd say if anybody has $50 million and wants to buy about 300 radio stations across the country, we could really start to break through a little bit, but it has to be AM radio. So here's the thing. The first thing I want to say, and this is just me picking up on a perception that Democrats or people who are moderate, Republicans even often have, is that, rural means farmer. So only 10% of rural Iowans are farmers, but 100% of rural Iowans think that they are a farmer. And so, and I can say that as a rural Iowan, right? Like, I don't farm a damn thing, but I will call myself a farmer because I live on an acre, right? I guess I farm grass, I mow the grass, and it's a nice product that we have. But what I will say is that the key to breaking through, I think, is that a lot of rural Iowans, my mom included, who sees herself as a farm girl, actually lived in Atlantic, Iowa, making $17,000 a year and not being able to get by. So we have to be willing to talk about issues like poverty and homelessness and healthcare, and all of those things actually matter to those people. The same things that matter to all of us. People in rural Iowa who are retired still can't get to the grocery store, just like people and sometimes it's even harder because you don't have a grocery store. If you live in Minot, Iowa, and there's no grocery store, and you have to get to Indianola or Norwalk, I mean, who's going to take you? You don't always have somebody. And that's just as hard sometimes as living in Des Moines and not being able to get a few blocks away, or being able to get to the bus stop. So I think the key to understanding and unlocking our potential in rural Iowa comes from actually talking to people about issues that they care about and not just painting them with one brush and patronizing them as farmers. Not everybody is a farmer. Any other questions?
Does, Rob Sand's political, where does he want to do something else? Does he have aspirations to go something?
Okay, it's 7:55, and I guarantee you Rob doesn't know what he's having for breakfast this morning. So 3 years is a long time. I don't know. I assume he will do something after this, but I mean, he just ran a very tough race, and he went to bed on election night thinking about what he was going to do next, and then woke up the next morning to find out he still had to do this job for 4 more years. So, I mean, it was very close, 0.2%, right? I mean, but again, this goes back to going everywhere and talking about it. I mean, it's possible, we can do it. So I don't know what Rob's gonna do next. I mean, I don't think he knows what he's doing next.
Like, you don't know what you're doing next.
I plan to go over there and have some coffee next.
Thank you.